Hello and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. My name is Joris and today I'm going to talk about ETFs that invest into the USA, and in this part 1 it's going to be about the S&P 500. So European ETFs that invest into the USA, actually we don't have that many. So I'm going to talk about 19 European ETFs that invest into the USA and that pay a dividend. And in this first part, it's going to be about the S&P 500, and it's going to be 5 ETFs. In the next part, it's going to be about quality dividend ETFs. Part 3 is going to tackle the Nasdaq 100 and one Islamic ETF. And in part 4, finally, it's going to be the higher dividend ETFs, and that is going to go about 4 ETFs plus 2 that I already mentioned for the S&P 500 and one in the Nasdaq 100. And just so you know, the invested capital is always in the currency of the listing of the stock, of the ETF. The performance is always corrected to US dollar valuations, and that's really important so that there is a pretty good comparison possible between all the ETFs that I mentioned. And then the dividend and the dividend yields are always calculated in the currency of the dividend. So I'm not going to repeat that, but I'm always going to put it on the slide in the next videos as well. So this series is going to contain 4 parts about ETFs that invest into the USA, and the USA, it's the biggest economy of the world, so you should have it in your portfolio, but you should also include, as a European investor, you should also include European ETFs, and I already made a series about that, so you can check out those videos after you watch this video. And also the data that I'm using is from the end of the trading day of today, and that's Friday the 19th of April of 2024. So let's go into the first one. It's the IUSA or IDUS. So as you know, it's always the case in Europe, you have multiple ticker symbols, and in this series it's not going to be different. There are only 2 ETFs that have the same ticker on all the stock exchanges where they are noted. So yeah, I think they should really tackle that, but for now I'm just going to always use the one from the 6th stock exchange, and if there isn't a notation on the 6th stock exchange, I'm going to use now the German stock exchanges ticker symbols. So always the ISIN code is mentioned on for every on the slide for every ETF that I mentioned, and then the total expense rate is 0.07% for the IUSA, so the iShares Core S&P 500 UCITS ETF. And as you know, the UCITS ETF, that's just to say that it's abiding to the European rules concerning ETFs. On the 6th, it's noted in US dollar, and the current price is 49.75 US dollar. Also, the dividend is paid out in US dollar. There are 503 holdings in this ETF, so it's about the S&P 500, but still it contains 503. The amount invested into this ETF is 13 billion and a bit, 357 million. So a lot of the ETFs that I already mentioned on this YouTube channel, you know that 357 million is often a huge number for emerging markets or the European market. So in this case, the American market, 13.3 billion. The replication type, it's a fully replicated one. There are only 2 sampling ETFs in this series, so most of the time it will be fully replicated ones. The performance of this ETF, the past year it's up 23%, the past 3 years it's up 25%, so not much difference there. But as you know, yeah, 2022 is has something to do with that, of course. And then 5 years it's up 86.45%. Since its inception, it's up almost 500%. But I'm not going to mention that. As you know, it's just a point that I always give, and it's important here. It's after the crash of 2000 and 2001. So the dot-com bubble was passed. So that's what it has going for it here. And then you have 4 dividends per year in the months March, June, September, and December. And the dividend yield is 1.18%. And here you can see that the distributions over the year in each quarter are plus minus the same. And I really like that, and that's mainly because a lot of the stocks that are noted in America, they give a dividend every quarter, and those dividends, they stay more or less the same. Sometimes they rise. So here you see the first dividend from March of 2024 is a little bit higher than the ones that were given in the year before, in the previous 3 quarters of the year before. So yeah, it's slowly going up, but you have a better distribution there than in Europe. In Europe, it's always low, low, high. Around June, July, it's a high distribution that you get, and then again lower distributions over the quarters. So that's not that great in Europe, but in America, yeah, there it's really nice, and that's why I also made a video about that we want quarterly dividends. I really hope that some stocks here or companies here in Europe decide that they also are going to distribute their dividends quarterly, because it's really nice as a dividend investor that the dividends are more evenly distributed over the year. Then we go to VUSA or VUSD, and that's from the ETF from Vanguard, so about the S&P 500. The currency on the 6 stock exchange is Swiss francs, so that's really nice for Swiss people, of course. The currency of the dividend is in US dollar, which is not so nice then for Swiss people, but at least you don't have the exchange rate buying into the ETF. The total expense ratio is 0.07%. There are 499, so not 503 here, but 499 holdings into this ETF. And it's the highest number that you will see this series. And I think, yeah, of a lot of my videos. So 35.8 billion invested into this ETF. And the strange thing is, it's much younger, this ETF, than the previous one. So it's about 10 years younger, and still there is more than double the amount of money into the Vanguard ETF than the iShares ETF. The total expense ratio is the same, so it's nothing to do with that. And also the performance, it's good, but always slightly worse than the one from iShares. It also distributes 4 dividends per year, so quarterly, and the dividend yield is 1.70%, so only 0.01% lower than the one from iShares. And yeah, once again, nice distributions, even over the quarter. So what more do you want as a dividend investor? Then we have SPY 5, and that's from Spider S&P 500 UCITS ETF. So the total expense ratio here, it's the lowest one from the series with 0.03%. It's also noted in Swiss francs on the SIX stock exchange, and it's a quite high price, in fact, so 452.55 Swiss francs, and you need to buy a unit out of it, so you can't buy fractional shares on the SIX stock exchange. The currency of the dividend is in US dollar, and there are also 503, like in the iShares ETF. There is almost 8 billion invested into this ETF, also fully replicated one. And the past year it's up 23%, the past 3 years 25%, and the past 5 years a little bit less than 86%. And once again, 4 dividends per year, a dividend yield of 1.16%, so all comparable numbers there. And yeah, the number is here higher than the previous two, but the price is also higher. So the percentage, it's just the same. And once again, yeah, nice distributions evenly over the quarters. And then we have a special one from Invesco. It's not available on the SIX stock exchange yet, I hope, because I think it's an interesting thing to have an S&P 500 equal weight. So there, all the stocks are equal weighted into the ETF. And of course, because of the Magnificent Seven, they are highly weighted, of course, in the S&P 500. They make up quite big percentage of the S&P 500. So when there is equal weight for all the stocks, then that means that they are underweighted compared to the S&P 500 itself. And as you know, the past year, the S&P 500 was driven by the Magnificent Seven. All the other stocks, they only had a gain of 4% or so. So the rest is lagging behind. So when we look at the performance of this ETF, we will see it immediately. So I took the one from the Xetra stock exchange, and it's noted in euro. I only found the dividend in US dollar on the site of Invesco, so I'm using that. You also have this ETF on the London Stock Exchange, and there for sure the ETF pays out the dividend in US dollars, so I don't think it's that wrong to depict US dollar here. And then all the ETFs that I'm listing now pay out the dividends in US dollar, and like this the dividends are more comparable over the video series as well. So when you see the question mark in this series, it's always related to the fact that I only found the dividends as US dollar, but I didn't found the information on the stock exchange itself about how, in which currency the dividend is actually paid out. So on the Xetra I didn't find it. So excuse me for that, but I think the information that I give is still correct for US dollar. So I hope you don't mind that. So 503 holdings as well. Only 65 million invested into this ETF, fully replicated one as well. And here you immediately see, yeah, it's a young one, so 2021. And the past 3 years up 13.46%. So if you compare that to 25% and a bit for the other three, yeah, it's more or less half of it. So yeah, underweighing the Magnificent Seven compared to the weighing that those stocks have in the S&P 500 isn't. It didn't work out that well in the past 3 years, but for the future, I don't know whether or not it's going to pay out finally. As you know, from the Magnificent Seven, Tesla is dropping a lot of its leaves right now. It lost a lot of its value in the past few months, and I think it's going to continue going down because yeah, the sales are going down, they are losing market share as well, and some decisions are really strange. So yeah, it isn't looking great for Tesla. So that's already one of the seven of the Magnificent Seven that is yeah, performing less. And in that case, the underweighing of Tesla is good for this ETF. Also 4 dividends per year in the same months, and the dividend yield, it's a bit higher, of course. When you equal weigh everything and you have good dividend paying stocks in the S&P 500, so the dividend yield is going to go up then compared to the Magnificent Seven, where there are only a few stocks that really pay out a dividend, and Meta started with paying out a dividend, so but the dividend yield there is still low. And when you look at the distributions that it gave, yeah, it's once again nice, evenly distributed, and that's what I really like in the USA. That yeah, quarterly paying dividends stocks, they are just great. So let's cross our fingers that companies in Europe decide to go that way as well. And then of course I couldn't leave it out. We have XYLF, the Global X covered call UCITS ETF. I already talked about it in previous videos as well, so I'm going to go over it quite fast. But the covered call, it's actually not a dividend that you get. You get a small portion of dividend, and then you also get the distribution of the premies, of the premiums that they receive for selling covered calls. So it's actually more income-based ETF than actually a growth ETF. So you have to keep that in mind. My wife and I, we invest in the XYLF, but we want to have cash flow from it because we don't want to have the exchange rate every time when we want to invest into stocks in ETFs that note in US dollar. So in that regard, we really like the fact that it's noted in Swiss francs on the SIX stock exchange, and that it distributes US dollar, and that it has a quite high dividend payout. So the dividend payout is more or less 8%, and that's an estimate because we still don't have a complete year yet. So 1 year is empty in the performance, and yeah, we still have 3 distributions to go before we have a full year. But the last 3 distributions were really nice, with 10 cents for every distribution that they made. So yeah, if you look at the total overview, then you see that the XYLF is dangling on the bottom, and we have IUSA from iShares on top, and then the other ones are following closely behind of the ones that invest into the S&P 500. And then of course, because of the equal weighing from the Invesco one, the performance there is a little bit less, so more or less half. And yeah, it's not on the SIX, so you need to go to the London Stock Exchange or the German stock exchanges there to buy that one. And you need to realize that XYLF, it's not going to grow that much as the other ones, but you're going to get the higher distribution, and that gives you the freedom to invest that money into other things. And as you heard, yeah, my wife and I, we bought it just to convert actually the Swiss francs into US dollar without the extra cost of the exchange rates, because it's always around 1%, and it it gets more and more over time. Also, when we buy the euros, it really eats away our profits a bit. So in the long run, it doesn't matter that much. 1% from the get-go, it doesn't matter that much. Then the total expense ratio is more important. And there as well, XYLF is not scoring that good in that regard. Certainly not compared to the SPY 5. But still, you see, the lower tier doesn't actually make that it performs better than the one from the iShares and from Vanguard. So the traders from iShares and Vanguard are doing something really great compared to the one from the spiders. So yeah, there was also a lot of inflow into the one from the SPDR. So it's something strange that even with a lower total expense ratio, the ETF from the SPDR is lagging behind. So yeah, that was it for the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you like this kind of content, yeah, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Hit that like button as well. The notification bell, that's not necessary. Normally I post Monday and Thursday my videos. Today it's a day later, but I needed to wait until the market closed, so that yeah, that it's easier to make the complete series in one go. Otherwise, when I made this video yesterday evening and then the other ones on the next days, then it wasn't going to be that comparable. Certainly not with the events this morning, with the drones that were, yeah, dropped above Iran, possibly from Israel. We don't know yet. So Israel is keeping quiet about it. But of course, it had a huge impact on the stock market today. So in that regard, thank you for watching and see you on the next one on my YouTube channel. Bye.